everyone. Welcome back to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. Thank you so much for being here for another week. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're catching this episode. And this is actually, I think, the first episode of its kind. I don't think I've ever talked about profit sharing with a guest, or really at all, ever on my show in what is now basically 5 years. So this is a long overdue conversation, and I'm really excited to have Rob Gallaher on the podcast because this is his bread and butter. This is what he's really going to help us understand better and hopefully implement in our own businesses and organizations. So let me introduce you to Rob. He is the CEO of Gallaher Co. In 2010, he started his own construction company and has since grown to lead 5 companies across multiple industries. For over a decade, he has been building and leading businesses. One of the most powerful lessons he's learned is the incredible impact of aligning employee success with company success, which fueled his passion for profit sharing. Through years of implementing and refining these strategies in his own companies, Rob has seen firsthand how profit sharing can transform a workplace in fostering collaboration, boosting motivation, and ultimately driving significant growth. He recently distilled this experience and insight into his book, Profit Sharing: The Power of Shared Success. And in July, he launched an online course teaching others how to set up profit sharing in their own organizations. So, Rob, thank you so much for bringing all of your wisdom and insight to us this week.
Oh, thank you, Traci, for having me on. I'm passionate about the subject and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
Of course. Well, we're really glad to have you on. And like I said, this has not ever been a subject talked about on the podcast, which means that there is a real opportunity for everyone listening to learn something new, or maybe even be challenged a little bit on their own beliefs around profit sharing, whether they've experienced or kind of interacted with this type of business strategy or not before. So maybe what we have to do, considering this is a new topic for the show, is first understand and talk about what profit sharing really is. And so I'll pass to you since you are, this is really your domain.
Yeah, well, the best understanding of profit sharing starts with the problem you're trying to solve. And my particular story was I was 3 years self-employed. I had about 30 team members, 2 companies. And my problem was I was struggling with this idea that my employees didn't think, care, or work like I did. And so I started this journey of self-education. I was talking to other business owners about what they were doing about this problem. I started reading books, and I really wanted to solve it. I was micromanaging. I was horrible at delegating because I didn't trust anyone because they didn't think like I did. And I double checked all their work because they didn't care like I did. And then they didn't do it fast enough or good enough because they didn't work like I did. And this was the major complaint that I had. It's also the major complaint that I found from every business owner that I was reaching out to and speaking with. And so in my journey to solve this problem, this idea of profit sharing came across my desk. And it was a page and a half in a book that I was reading where this author was talking about that he did it in certain ways across a couple of his departments in his company, but there was not a lot of information. So I really dug into this idea of what profit sharing was. Like what it is, it's pretty simple. It's basically sharing the profit of an organization to the people that are responsible for making that profit. But the how to do it is the challenging part. And that's the problem that I couldn't find the solution to. So I could not find a how-to guide. I couldn't find spreadsheets. I couldn't find metrics on how to do it or to base it off of gross profit or net profit or revenue, what percentage to give away, who gets it in your organization. All these questions start to come up when you sit down with a blank piece of paper and your pen and you start to write out your profit sharing program. You get stuck really, really fast. So in my particular instance, I, discovered this idea and I read everything I could about it, which wasn't a lot of help because there was no how-to about it. It was all theory about profit sharing. I brought 2 of my leaders in and I sat them down one day and said, I want to do this idea of profit sharing. I'm going to try this idea out. I think that would really bridge the gap between ownership and the team and aligning our goals to accomplish what a business is supposed to do every month is profit. And then when you have profit, you can invest in your team, you can invest in equipment, you can serve more customers. Nothing good happens without profit first, right? You have to have
Totally.
profit. Yeah. So if there's no money in the bank, you can't move any needles on any spectrum, human or corporate or financial or anything. So we sat down that day and we started going through all these questions, and we had all our P&Ls printed out. We had our balance sheet there. We had all these metrics, your traditional metrics of a business.
Mm.
And we came up with, by basically throwing some darts in a black room at a dartboard we didn't know where it was, our first profit sharing program. And then that next quarter, we cut our first profit sharing checks,
Wow.
and it was a total disaster. I spent thousands of dollars, and as the owner, we didn't see, feel, or got anything different as far as an ROI on this
Mm.
program, which was an investment into our future, an investment into our team. And so that we went back to the drawing board. We spoke to the team members that got the profit sharing. We got more people involved on figuring out what it was supposed to do, what the owner wanted, myself, and what they were looking for, and how we were going to tie those two metrics together to create this one body of people that were thinking, caring, and working the same. And
Mm.
that's the journey that I went on, and that's where I'm at today. I perfected this system. I've put it into play, and I've seen the results. It's proven, and the growth and the numbers speak for themselves. My retention speaks for itself, and I want other business owners to know this. The value that it's provided to my life is immense. The value it's provided to my team members' lives is immense, and I haven't seen anything more powerful in business than a unified team that goes out every day and wins.
I love that last line that you just shared. And I totally agree. There's something really powerful about that feeling. And hopefully we all have been a part of a team where we're like, oh yeah, we're doing this together. And I have in the past made the mistake of leading a team like that. And then you realize not every team is like that. And you're like, what the heck did I just do?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think there is something motivational about that for all of us, that we can create that in our own organizations. And when you and I had first of all, thank you for going over what profit sharing is in essence. And when you and I had first spoken a week or so ago, before recording, it made me think, like, what other organizations that are like household names, so to speak, um, engage in this profit sharing type of practice. And I learned a lot. I had no idea that companies like Procter and Gamble, Southwest Airlines, and a handful of other companies engage in profit sharing. And again, household names here. And they do things totally differently. Procter and Gamble, they look at the total annual profits, and then they divide them based on role and tenure. And then Southwest Airlines, this is based on an article at least from last year, so if hopefully it's still accurate, but forgive me if it's not. Southwest Airlines, they make the percentage that is paid out as part of the profit sharing plan a part of the annualized salary. So it's kind of, to me, that is almost similar to a commission in that it's baked into your total compensation. But it does the same thing in the sense that you are motivated by the company's overall achievement, and that you are effectively like a joint owner. You see your role at those companies and your own companies as being within the same level of ownership, even if the percentages are different, as someone else, as the owner, as the CEO. And I think that there's something really powerful about that. And I would imagine, because this was a question that I had, that I had to do some research on, I would imagine that there are some listeners who maybe work for companies who are ESOPs, like employee stock ownership plan based companies, or companies that do provide stock incentives to their employees, that maybe there's a question like, what's the difference? Like, the stock ownership plan is similar to profit sharing. And actually, while that might be true, I did some research and I found that really the most significant differences are that the profit sharing setup and components really rely on the profits. And so you're getting these realized profits in the moment, because it's whether it's after the annual profits or it's quarterly. To your point, every company kind of does things differently, and there wasn't a playbook when you were trying to create this for yourself and your own business. But that's a pretty significant difference compared to an employee stock ownership plan, because that is based on the valuation of the company and not necessarily the profit. Of course, the greater the profits, the greater the valuation. But it is that, to me, that's actually a pretty significant difference. While both work to motivate and create ownership amongst the team. And so I'm curious, in your own experience with profit sharing, that intrinsic value in terms of the motivation, the ownership, how has that transformed collaboration and the way that your team works together? Do you see fewer friction points? Do you see more of the camaraderie and the collaboration?
So I see a lot of things, and over the years, I've seen a lot of things that I didn't expect. And we could talk about probably 10 different things, but one thing that I think, as a HR human resource background that you have, and you probably have a lot of human resource managers listening, but
Hmm.
so in that point, like you have a team, let's say you have 6 people on, and let's say you're a plumbing company, right? So you have the owner, you got a dispatcher, you have some estimators, project manager, maybe an office manager, a GM. You have this group of leaders that are all in charge of, getting information from the customer, estimating the job, and dispatching the plumbers, and then the invoicing, right? So the whole operation of what a company would do. And you can use this example for a flower shop or a bakery or any kind of company. But what I've seen is that this group of 6 people, as the company grows, you have a profit sharing program in there, and you'll see growth happen because everybody starts to become united. They start to understand what the goal is every day and how to sustain that goal, right? People get treated better because now it's about, okay, so we made a mistake today. We can learn from that mistake. Let's make sure everybody knows about this, learns the same lesson so it doesn't repeat itself in the future. I've seen a, a team root out the donkeys from the stallion stable, right? Stallions don't want to run with donkeys. Eagles don't want to
Hmm.
fly with turkeys. So when you have a bad apple somewhere in there and the whole team's on profit sharing and this one person's dragging the team down and hurting profit, which hurts their profit sharing check, they will help the owner or the human resource manager get that person out of the building. And,
Mm.
these are things that I didn't think about going on. I've seen people think outside the box and bring ideas that have been fantastic, right? They're not just clocking in and clocking out anymore. They're actually thinking about how can I make a difference? How can we make more profit? So someone gets a profit sharing check for $1,000. The first thought is, how do we do this next month? And the month after that? How do we make them bigger and more consistent? And so they'll start having their own internal dialogue about repeating this success over and over and over again. And as a business owner, one of the stresses we deal with every day is payroll every week or every 2 weeks, however you're set up. And then how are you going to sustain this, excuse me, long term, right? We all have these flashes in the pan of profit and success, but maybe that was a certain customer that came in with a big order. And then now we need to go find the next customer. And how are you going to
Hmm.
continue this machine that you have to feed that you built? So profit sharing has solved tons of those issues that business owners deal with. And it's created this sense for myself. One of the huge things for myself that I did not see coming was I don't feel alone like I did before. I don't feel like it's me at the top cracking the whip, pulling people up, or at the bottom trying to push people up all the time. I have team members that are pulling with me and pushing with
Hmm.
me, other team members to in the same direction and getting them on board without me having to do it or without me having to lead the charge. So there's a ton of things that, you can imagine. The biggest complaint business owners have is the whole thinking, caring, and working like a business owner. Well, the reason
Totally.
why your employees don't do that is because they don't get paid like a business owner does, right? They don't have the same skin in the game. That business is a job to them. It's not their identity like a business owner has. So when you can bridge that gap and create this kind of self-employed mentality among the team, and then paint the picture that the team wins together or dies together, right? Tom Brady, we all know who Tom Brady is,
Hmm.
did not win those football games by himself. And he's a great
Right.
football player, but if there was 11 Tom Brady's on that field playing this game, they would have lost every single game, right? So you have to have people's different strengths and weaknesses in the right position and the right timing and the right training. As a team, they won all those games and all those Super Bowls. And that's what you're trying to create in your business as the owner, is that teamwork, putting people on the right seat on the bus to drive it forward every single day.
Absolutely. And there's so much value in what you've just shared around this sense of such deeply felt mutual ownership. And it's something that in various episodes across my show, I've talked about that when you drive ownership, it's not just accountability, but actual ownership. That's when you see people working differently and working differently together. And when I think about some of the HR problems that naturally come to mind for someone like me, and probably many of the listeners too, around, well, how do you navigate poor performance? What do you do? I mean, to me, intuitively, it makes me think, well, the poor performers are so obvious
Mhm.
because you have all of these other people who are so with it and in the game and focused on winning together, that then the person, to your point, who isn't pulling their weight is potentially kind of an outcast because they're not doing what they need to do. And then it's like, well, they're going to take a cut of the profits that we're working toward. And so I imagine it's like any other underperformer circumstance where, the team and the managers work to, either get them to be where they need to be or to resolve the issue entirely. And then it also makes me think about how people are rewarded when they are going above and beyond, and they are, clearly driven by being having this sense of ownership in a company. Those people, even in organizations where profit sharing is not established, are generally, hopefully, well rewarded. But I would imagine in a profit sharing based organization that they're able to be rewarded even more fruitfully because of the impact that they have or the promotions that they get. And you did also mention, kind of at the top of the recording, that um, your retention is fundamental. Like, you've been able to retain your team in such a way that is generally quite difficult to do for companies because what's in it for them.
Right.
And so I'm sure there's a really important story there too.
Yeah. So a couple things for your listeners. We still pay a competitive wage in our
Of
marketplace.
course.
So this is not a low base salary plus commission type role. So where the retention comes in is that, you have a, construction superintendent, and his wages, let's say in the area, let's say they're $80,000 a year salary. Okay. So he can get a job somewhere else making $80,000 a year. But can he get a job making $80,000 a year that's offering a minimal $1,000 threshold profit sharing program where, we hit, 9, 10 times out of the year. So there's an extra $10,000 of income that he gets at our company. So he's actually making more money than the competitive wages for his role. And then he's also works in an environment that works together, right? The
Hmm.
culture is good. Like you said, you left a team that was really good and then realized when you were gone what you had. And so,
Hmm.
we talk about those things, we teach those things, and they see that and live that every day. The other thing I wanted to mention, you brought up about the employee owned stock. You brought up the, like a quarterly type profit sharing bonuses, or they work it into their salary. So the one of the big differences with my program is let's talk about the employee-owned stock. That's the biggest example. I'm in the Bay Area, so I see startups, these tech startups, these AI companies, these tech companies all over the time, and their biggest hook is the stock that they give people, early days when they're
Yes.
not worth anything. So you're an engineer, you join in, they're going to give you 10,000 stock or whatever that's worth nothing. But and then that's their hook into you to perform and help this company grow and get this huge evaluation where that stock becomes money. We only hear about the success stories, right? One of my early jobs I did was for an IBM employee number 27, and he was a forklift driver.
Wow.
And he worked there his whole career and became the warehouse manager, logistics. As IBM grew, he grew with the company, and he retired a very wealthy man because of these stock options that he had. So we all hear those stories. I can tell you this, they're rare. There's way more stories of these startups firing up, getting these stock options, and then the company not making it or never, going out of business, losing their funding. My EA who's sitting in the room with me right now worked at a company like that where they lost funding for this project, and then overnight the company was gone. And what that stock option, that hook, that supposedly profit sharing was worth nothing. So this program is way more nuts and bolts. We pay it out monthly, not quarterly, not at Christmas time. And the reason why we do that, because that ties in somebody's daily behavior, because you're affecting their monthly bills. Everybody's bills are monthly. No one thinks about their grocery budget, what it is quarterly, right? We don't think about it,
Totally.
right?
Totally.
We don't think that far ahead. Everything financially that we finance, that we budget for, is done on a monthly basis. So why are we not making that cow fatter? That monthly, I think of it like a gas tank, right? So every month we fill up the tank of gas, and then we got to make it to the end of the month before we hit E. And hopefully, some of us are better about it than others, but hope there's some that's going to be left at the bottom of that tank. When you profit share monthly, you're affecting that needle that everybody thinks about every day. Everybody thinks about their bills every day. And then when they're thinking about that and how they can fill up that gas tank more, that's where you tie in the daily actions and thoughts of your team members towards that monthly goal.
That's awesome. I love that you talk about the behaviors tied to this strategy in paying out the profit sharing percentages monthly. That to me is actually the biggest issue that I have with like a standard bonus scheme or structure within a business that doesn't have profit sharing, because the one quarter or one half or one bonus per year is just simply not enough to actually transform or adjust or alter behaviors and behavior changes that you need to be consistent. And I think your example of the grocery bill or the gas tank, it's a perfect example. Like we move on from things very quickly. Like if someone, as humans, if someone gets feedback that they need to do something differently and they get it once in an entire quarter, that next quarter it's probably not even going to be brought up because the manager forgot about it, or they're not really that much of an underperformer, and the person wasn't followed up on, so it doesn't actually really matter. But when someone is impacted or spoken to monthly, or in this case their bottom line is impacted because the profit isn't there for at the company level, so they're not making that additional X amount of dollars per month, they're listening. They're aware of what behaviors they need to either continue or change. And behaviors to me that's like the catalyst for how companies can change and grow. And especially, we talk about culture a lot on my podcast, and culture generally comes down to the behaviors that are celebrated and rewarded, or the behaviors that are not celebrated and rewarded. And either hopefully they're the right behaviors that are being celebrated and rewarded, but sometimes in companies that have more challenging cultures, the wrong behaviors are the ones that are celebrated and rewarded. And so behavior, I think, is really fundamental to business strategy and to collaboration and mutual ownership and all of those things that we've talked about. And certainly, as you've pointed out, really fundamental to profit sharing, because everyone benefits when the right behaviors are displayed and rewarded.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like one thing I preach against is Christmas bonuses. Nobody thinks
Mm.
about getting their Christmas bonus in February. No one's
Totally.
no one's working harder in March thinking about that Christmas bonus. Now, Christmas bonuses are fun, right? That's a great Christmas party. People do look forward to them. They actually wait till after Christmas to quit to make sure that they get it,
Yes,
right?
right.
So we see a lot of 2-week notices in January.
In January,
Yeah,
right?
but when you do it monthly, so and then I got an even better example, like the quarterly bonuses. When we started our profit sharing program, we had, like I said, it was a total disaster. We didn't know what we were doing. So we started quarterly because that's what you hear about, the corporate quarter
Hmm.
bonus,
Hmm.
in America here. And so we started that way. Nobody thought about their bonus they were going to get in April for the first quarter. They didn't think about it in January or February. And I saw this sense of rush in the middle of March.
Hmm.
So here we are. We have 12 weeks to get this quota or to make this as big as we can. And now we're thinking about it 2 weeks before. We didn't do anything extra in January or February. So that's what made us transition to the monthly. And that's where I really want your listeners to hear that. That's how so important it is, because when you're bonusing out quarterly or yearly, you're not changing that needle. You're not filling that gas tank that they're worried about. So you're not in their daily thoughts and actions. And therefore that money that company's paying is a complete waste, and it's
Mm.
super inefficient. When you tie in their monthly financial needle to the income, extra profit sharing that they can make, that's where you're going to see your estimator driving to a job site 20 minutes away is not going to listen to the radio and zone out. He's going to listen to a podcast about being a better estimator, or about communication, or about being a better leader. They'll start doing things they'll start reading self-help books at home, or learn more about their trade to help affect that needle more every day for their own lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, you know, again, everything that you're saying makes it's so intuitive. Like it makes total sense. Not
Why
everyone
is it
is
not
meant
used everywhere then?
that's the thing, and that's
Yeah.
actually exactly where I'm going, because one of the things that I was thinking about is that not everyone is meant to own their own business. Not everyone is going to own their own business. And so this is like the next best thing. They get to influence, they get to impact, and they get to take the same level of pride in what they do for someone else's business, and have that mutual ownership. And so my final question for you is, why aren't more businesses doing this? Like it seems like such a simple, not simple, but on the surface, such an intuitive and simple way to drive better collaboration, better teamwork, and more ownership.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a question that I want to answer for everybody and solve, because I just think back to when I was running my business without it. And I come across this idea. So, for one, I didn't know about it. You don't hear about this like a ton or a lot. It's not preached from the mountaintops. But, and then once I got the idea and I was like, I kind of want to pursue this. I think this would solve a lot of my problems. I felt this ceiling in my organization of, how do I take these 30 people and get them on the same page? And that's a daunting task. I was 28 years old, and I had a lot of leadership experience. Like, I was ahead of my game as far as that. So I felt like if I was going to struggle with this, that's why I started going to these 60-year-old business owners that have been doing it for 30 years, and I wasn't getting good answers.
Mm.
And then when I started looking into it, there was no how to. And then I remember that moment sitting at my desk with a blank piece of paper and a pen, and just immediately getting stuck, because there's so many questions as a business owner. There's so many metrics financially that you have to keep an eye on. And those business owners, business ownership is hard. You're worried about, sustaining what's going on. You're worried about the problems you're having today. You're worried about making your commitments tomorrow, whether that's financial or jobs or promises or suppliers or whatever it is, right? And so to actually, first of all, just to have time to work and think on your business is a challenge. And we get so caught up being fireman. We get really good at being a fireman, putting out fires all day long, that's what takes our attention. And then you get down to it, there was no guidance, there was no help.
Mm.
And my book is the first book that I've been able to find that actually tells you how to do it and gives, and then my course gives you the spreadsheets that I still use today. And it gives
Wow.
you all the things that you need to have in order before you profit share, right? Because like when I started, I was like, can I even do this? Is this even sustainable? Is it smart? All these questions I had, and I just jumped off the cliff. And it took about 3 years before I landed on my feet. And it was a huge success, but that's why people don't do it. And then as business owners, you're constantly being bombarded with, you need more marketing, you need more
Mm-hmm.
this, these communication classes, these trainings, this, you got to fly your people to this conference. There's all these things that are constantly coming at you that cost money that do help. I think I'm a huge fan of education and investing in your team, but it's like, how much do you do? When do you do it? Who do you do it with? What do you do it about? Like it's a lot for a business owner. And
Yeah.
as you grow, and I think this kind of really kicks in as a problem when you get to about employee 5 through 10. When you're a mom and pop and you're in your garage, like I started in my garage, and I had 5 guys, they saw me every day. It was easy to know what everybody was doing and going on. And this
Mm-hmm.
problem didn't really, it started smacking me in the face till probably employee number 10, but it really punched me at number 30. And then I'm like, dang, I feel this ceiling, and there's
Mm.
gotta be a better way and a different way to do this that's not going to send me to an early grave, that's not going to take me away from my children and my marriage, that I can have a balance with all that, whatever balance means, but that can have this success without me doing everything myself.
Totally. I really appreciate um all of the ways that you've thought about your own business and others, and how you kind of took this problem that you found where you couldn't find the answers. You knew you needed an answer and you couldn't find them, and so you created a solution for that. So I think that's really awesome, and really, again, like very inspiring, very motivating to think, we all could, for those of us who aspire to have our own businesses or who do own our own businesses, that we could also one day kind of engage in the same type of structure, should we be so lucky to grow our businesses to be able to do that. So thank you, Rob, so much for coming on the podcast, being our first official profit sharing guru, and sharing your wisdom. In a sense, you've profit shared with us because you've helped us to understand what we can do for our own organizations or our own businesses that we might own, and hopefully have a better and more deeply felt impact on the people around us and the organizations that we're within. So thank you. And we'll have everything linked, but just as a point, where can everyone find your book and register for a class and get to know you a bit better, get connected?
Yeah, so the book is on Amazon. It's like $10. We're not making any money on it. We just want to get the word out. In that book, you'll find the 3 things that you need before you consider profit sharing. You'll find the 10 rules on profit sharing that I've learned all the hard way. I was not an instant success. This is all from the ground up.
Mm.
And you'll also find, we talk about the DMs, the decision makers of who gets it and how do you determine that. So there's a lot of things in there. There's a great jump start. And then profitx.co is our website where you can buy the course. You can also buy time with me, and I can personally walk you through and help you and guide you in setting up your profit sharing program for success. Find me on Facebook and Instagram, Rob Gallaher. It's not all work and business on there. I got hobbies and my kids and funny stuff we do in the gym and what's going on in my life. So I'd love to connect with business owners and leaders in the industry that are really looking for the cherry on top of being a leader and having an organization that kicks butt.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rob. Again, really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll have you back on the podcast one day.
Thank you, Traci. That was fun.
Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to this show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.